We all may think we know Vince McMahon and his family on screen, but how much do you really know about the wrestling dynasty behind the scenes? 10 things you might not know about the McMahon family. Vince McMahon has a brother we've never seen. We know about the 4 main members of the McMahon family, but do you also know that Vince McMahon wasn't an only child? His brother name is Roderick McMahon, and despite being on good terms their whole lives, he has never appeared on WWE TV. Apparently, this is because he has found riches elsewhere and isn't a fan of pro wrestling, which is probably why he has never been mentioned or seen. Linda and Vince married at a young age. This was the norm back in the day, but it's still something you might not know about Vince and Linda McMahon. When the two met, Vince was 16 while Linda was 13. And if you can believe it, her parents weren't too fond of Vinnie Mac. The two were then married just 4 years later when Linda was 17 and are obviously still together 50 years later. Shane and Stephanie both had to pay their dues. When your last name is McMahon, you command respect in the wrestling business. But for the youngest two in the business, they had to earn it. Shane worked his way into the industry as a referee, while Stephanie was an assistant and modeled the WWE's merchandise. They may have been born into riches, but it's good to see the siblings working hard to make their way in their father's industry. The family was quite poor early on. I doubt that you'd ever think of poor and Vince McMahon in the same sentence, but he wasn't always as well off as he is today. His father always worked in wrestling, but didn't give Vince any handouts. And while he worked as a salesman to pay the bills, the family had to declare bankruptcy. Things are obviously much better these days, and no McMahon for generations to come will have to ever worry about money. The McMahons spent over $100 million on Linda's political campaigns. Linda McMahon has had a few failed political campaigns over the years, but what you might not know is how much it hurt the family's pockets. This is usually quite expensive, and the costs are covered by donors. But in this case, at least $100 million came straight from the McMahon family. This is the record for the most expensive campaign in history and beats out a presidential campaign for that spot, which are historically much more expensive. Shane practically raised Stephanie. We all know what a hectic schedule the WWE stars take on, so can you even imagine how hard it would be running the WWE? This had Vince away home more often than not, and allowed Shane and Stephanie to grow very close at home. Obviously, Vince and Linda were major influences, and certainly not absent from their lives. But when it came to the day-to-day stuff in Steph's early years, her biggest influence was definitely Shane. Vince is open with Linda about infidelity. If you're a longtime wrestling fan, by now you should know that Vince McMahon is one crazy SOB. So how have he and Linda stayed together so long? With his company employing many beautiful young women, he has not been able to resist such temptations, but he is open with his wife about all of this. I guess knowing each other for so long has given the two a bond that will never be broken. Vince McMahon once lost $350 million in one day. When CM Punk said Vince McMahon is a millionaire who should be a billionaire in his famous promo, he wasn't wrong, and this proves it. He has lost and earned a lot of money in a short time, but this day in 2014 was the worst of it. On this day, the WWE stock plummeted, and when it was all over, McMahon had lost $350 million in 24 hours, knocking him out of the Billionaires Club. Shane left the WWE to save his relationship with Vince. Working with someone who also happens to be your father could get hard at times, and in 2009, Shane McMahon had decided to pursue other ventures. This wasn't because there was heat between the father and son. Things were actually on great terms. The reason he did this was to preserve the relationship, as he felt that too much of each other would ruin it. After 7 years apart, he had returned in 2016, and things looked to be as good between the two. Nobody knows who's taking over when Vince is gone. Smart business strategy is to always have a contingency plan. But if rumors are correct, WWE doesn't have one in place after Vince. With both Triple H and Shane McMahon making strong cases as the future of the company, it's no surprise that there is tough competition for control once Vince is gone. No matter who wins, when it's all said and done, the WWE looks to be in great hands once Vince finally passes on the torch. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, you may not like them, but there's no denying what the McMahons have done for the wrestling business.